September 1941. Across the rolling hills and industrial valleys of western Pennsylvania, the air was cooling down. But the tension? That was just heating up. Whispers of danger traveled faster than the wind, jumping from porch to porch and to shop to shop. 3 men from Cleveland had a plan. It was a plan born in the shadows of a prison yard and fueled by a desperate, reckless ambition. I'm Van Holsing, and you're listening to Life, the Universe, and Everything in Between. This wasn't just a string of robberies. It was a calculated assault that would leave towns on edge and test the mettle of law enforcement and ordinary citizens alike. These weren't your typical desperate drifters. They were organized, they were experienced, and they were relentless. Over the span of just a few frantic days, they would cut a jagged path through the region, striking a gun store in Newcastle, a bank in Harrisville, before finally meeting their match in a small, hardworking town called Ellwood City. This is the story of the Great Shootout of 1941. It's a tale of crime, unexpected courage, and the kind of split-second thinking that transform a terrifying afternoon into a local legend. Our story begins not on the road, but behind bars. To understand the violence of 1941, we have to look at the men holding the guns. Albert Philo, age 26, hailing from Republic, Pennsylvania. Volger Everarts, age 27, from Smithville. And Kenneth Palmer, age 33, a Valant native. These men didn't meet at a job site or social club. They forged their bond within the cold stone walls of Rockview Penitentiary. By the time they walked out of those gates, they weren't rehabilitated. They were a team. In a dim Uniontown bar, just 2 weeks before their spree began, they sat huddled over drinks. They plotted a series of heists that would target the very small towns they grew up near. They knew the back roads. They knew the slow pace of rural life. And they intended to exploit it. Their chariot for this reign of terror? A stolen black 1939 Buick Club Coupe. In 1941, this was a beast of a machine. Fast, heavy, and powerful enough to outrun almost any standard-issued police cruiser of that era. It was inconspicuous enough to blend into traffic, yet sleek enough to vanish into the horizon once the gas pedal hit the floor. Their first stop was an investment in firepower, Rower's Gun Store on Water Street in Newcastle. On the moonless night of September 15th, the trio smashed their way in. They didn't just take a few pistols. They walked out with 20 revolvers, several high-powered rifles, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. They weren't just robbers anymore. They were an insurgent force. Days later, they tested their nerves at an insurance office in Farrell. They walked away with $400 after binding the employees with wire, a chilling preview of the ruthlessness they were prepared to show. By Friday, September 19th, the group was emboldened. They set their sights on the Harrisville Bank in Butler County. Imagine the scene. It's late afternoon, just minutes before closing. The sun is casting long shadows across the street. Inside, the atmosphere is quiet, the air smelling of old paper and ink. The men entered under the guise of ordinary customers. 2 of them approached the assistant cashier, W.E. McBride, and calmly asked for a roll of nickels. But as McBride reached for the change, the mask came off. The heavy steel of those stolen Newcastle revolvers was suddenly leveled at his chest.
This is a stick-up. Don't reach for any buzzers or make a false move, or I'll blow your brains out.
Employees and the lone customer, a college student named Claire Glenn, were forced to lie face down onto the cold floor. They listened to a frantic scraping of cash being shoveled into bags, nearly $2,000 in total. Even a local farmer, Howard Cooper, who had the misfortune of walking in to make a deposit, was intercepted and robbed at gunpoint. But the bandits made one critical mistake. they left the engine running. Arthur Brenneman, who owned the hardware store next door, was a man who noticed details. He saw that black Buick idling. He saw the driver's eyes darting nervously up and down the street. Brenneman didn't wait for a gunshot. He slipped to his phone and alerted the authorities. The hunt was officially on. The escape from Harrisville was a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, played across a labyrinth of back roads. The bandits knew the main highways would be death traps, so they drove into the winding secondary routes, pushing that Buick west towards Route 168. But the 1940s grapevine was working against them. A woman driving her husband to his shift spotted the speeding Buick and flagged down patrolman Peter Hillers. Within 30 minutes, a massive dragnet was tightening. Officers from Youngstown, Beaver Falls, Newcastle, Butler, they were all converging on a single geographic bottleneck, Ellwood City. Think about the tension for a moment. No GPS, no cell phones, just grit and radio static. The police knew the bandits were heading for the 5th Street Bridge. It was a vital artery crossing the creek. If they crossed that bridge, they might disappear into the rugged hills forever. Ellwood City's police chief, Ernest Hartman, wasn't a man to be trifled with. Hearing the reports of the armed trio, he didn't just grab a sidearm. He went to the department's locker and pulled out a .45 caliber Thompson submachine gun, the legendary Tommy gun. Hartman took his position at the north end of the 5th Street Bridge. He stood there, the wind whistling through the girders. Minutes later, the black Buick roared into view. Its tires were screaming as it rounded the corner.
Come out with your hands up in the air,
Hartman bellowed. The response was immediate and violent. The bandits didn't just break. They opened fire right through the windows. But Hartman didn't flinch. He squeezed the trigger of the Thompson, and the bridge erupted. He unleashed a staggering 100 rounds in a matter of seconds. The heavy slugs chewed through the Buick's bodywork and shattered the windshield into 1,000 pieces. Witnesses described the scene as pure warfare. One of the bandits was hit and slumped out the door, but his partner, still firing a revolver with one hand, reached out and dragged the wounded man back into the car as it careened away, trailing smoke and leaking oil. The Buick didn't get very far. Riddled with holes and losing power, the criminals crashed. They scrambled out, attempting to hijack a passing car to continue their flight. This is where the story shifts from a police shootout to an incredible display of civilian bravery. Edward Schaefer, an off-duty officer who was unarmed at the time, and Jim Pasta, a local clerk, saw the struggle. They didn't run for cover. They ran towards the gunfire. In the chaos, Jim Pasta managed to get close enough to engage Virgil Everts. In a desperate struggle for the weapon, Pasta shot Everts, ending the gunman's life right there on the pavement. Meanwhile, Schaefer found himself in a hand-to-hand fight with Kenneth Palmer. Seeing Schaefer in trouble, a local woman, Mrs. Laura Cash, rushed over with a heavy wrench and helped subdue Palmer until he could be handcuffed. Chief Hartman arrived moments later to find the scene secured. He disarmed a dying Albert Philo. The entire violent episode had lasted less than 20 minutes. Philo would pass away the next morning. Palmer, the sole survivor, would eventually find himself back in the very prison system where this plan had first been hatched. The dust had settled, but the story was just beginning to grow. The courage shown by Hartman, Schaefer, and Pasta became the bedrock of Ellwood City's history. A massive testimonial dinner was held to honor them, a moment of unity for a town that had stared down a trio of hardened killers and didn't blink. Even the kids got in on the action. Dick Walter, a teenage newsboy, realized he was standing on the biggest story of the century. He grabbed every extra edition he could find and sold out his entire stock in record time. Today, that very Thompson submachine gun is still preserved by the Ellwood City Police Department. It's a heavy, steel reminder of a day when the quiet of a Pennsylvania afternoon was shattered by gunfire. This story serves as a powerful reminder. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else is more important. On that September day in 1941, Ordinary citizens and lawmen alike decided that their town was worth fighting for. That was the story of the Great Shootout of 1941, a vivid, blood-stained chapter of Pennsylvania's past that proved, in the end, that even the most relentless criminals are no match for a community that stands together. I would like to say a special thanks to the Ellwood City Area Historical Society and researcher Robert Behrensfield. Their work in preserving the specific details of the shootout ensures that the bravery of Chief Hartman and his fellow citizens isn't forgotten. Thanks for joining me on this journey through life, the universe, and everything in between. I hope this episode gave you something to think about. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share, or if you just want to say hello, head over to theinbetweenpod.com. While you're there, be sure to check out the new evidence locker. We've pulled together photos, documents, and files linked to our most haunting cases. And until next time, keep your eyes open for what lies in the in-between.